maybe.
Surge. There's no duration on it. It is a permanent buff. And number 2 is when they click the box,
there are different types of
and they start to cast. Sorry, I'll mute it. So, sorry, Mark. But when you start to cast, you'll notice. Look at the mana bar. Look at the mana bar when they start to cast skills. This is something very, very important to me as somebody who's liked making mana builds in the past. And the important thing is the mana regen, the rate at which their mana is going up, is very, very high. And we know now why that is. It's because of what Arcane Surge does. Arcane Surge grants 10% more cast speed and 20% more mana regen per second. It's an outright multiplier.
Să vezi deja treaba cu deconectarea de la boss și varză. Adică, ce deconectare la boss? Ai o singură șansă la boss. Ai dat disconnect, trebuie să o iei de la capăt. Nu te dă de unde ai rămas.
And the important thing here is this node, which gives you permanent arcane surge.
Un singur portal la boss, exact, da. Asta poate să modifice pe viitor. Mi se pare și mie un pic cam de-am pixul.
Surge is followed.
Da, adică iar zic că te duci la boss abia după ce ești stăpân pe tine și vezi că poți să-l bați. Adică încerci să-l bați, dacă vezi că nu poți, mergi, mai farmezi un pic și te întorci înapoi și rup fâșul. Cum era în Diablo 2 cândva. Ți-mi minte când mergeam să-l bat pe Mephisto, nu puteam. Mergeam mai farma un pic, nu știu ce, mă întorceam și rupeam fâșul la Mephisto de... să termina șmecheria. Multe probleme vor fi descoperite. Bă, ca orice joc nou, ca și orice. Plus de asta e free to play, adică o să fie free to play.
Up by one of probably the strongest, one of the strongest nodes in the entire list of ascendancies, which is Arcane Surge effect per 15 mana. What that means is, as you scale up your mana build, you get more and more benefit. For example, a 3k mana build no longer gets 10% more cast speed, they get 30% more cast speed. They no longer get 20% more mana regen, they get 60% more mana regen. I believe mana builds on the high end, pretty well optimized.
Deci facem un test acum. Da, putem să numim și așa.
We'll probably get to 4k plus mana. If there's more uniques or more ways to get percent mana than what we've seen on the tree. So far, I've seen about 33% increased mana on the tree. If that number starts to go drastically up, so does the amount of mana you can end up getting, which makes this node just become more and more powerful the more you push into it. And the good news about that is it makes it a real scenario where you get to click Mind Over Matter. Mind Over Matter's big downside is it is 50% less mana recovery rate. If you have the ability to scale up to like 50% mana regen, you click this node and you still have 25% of your mana per second. That's still a really, really big deal. If you've been looking at any of the teasers of any of the passive tree, you've probably come away with the conclusion that life sustain and resource sustain in general is just scarcer. There's less regen, percent regen I'm seeing on the tree. There's not a ton of it. Leech seems a lot more awkward than it did in PoE 1 in terms of like getting, you need a base percentage and then there's a bunch of nodes you need to scale up to get the Leech to be decent. So I'm a little bit questionable on Leech. Even things like Recoup seems fairly scarce. There's, for example, I don't even know if this node is real, but it's 15% Fizz Recoup. It's specific and it's only to Fizz. Like there's way more limitations there. This node over here says 6% Recoup, and Recoup takes it takes course over 8 seconds instead of 4. So a lot of the sources of sustain I'm seeing for life builds are way more limited. For ES builds, you no longer have Ghost Reaver, so you can't get ES Leech naturally without like some other weird source like an Ascendancy like the Chonk, for example. There's also Zealot's Oath, which got changed, which means your base percent regen nodes you do click on the tree that would apply to life no longer work to apply to ES. You have to scale life to then make it the regen of your life, then go on the overcap to your ES. So there's some weird stuff where they're limiting scaling a lot more in terms of how much you can sustain per second. And what I'm seeing on Stormweaver and how much mana sustain you can get, and the fact that the new base percentage for mana regen is 4% based on Dreamcore's video, regen for mana can be actually fairly legit. I definitely could see a world where you get up to 50% plus mana per second, and then you can click Mind Over Matter and get 25% per second, which is still crazy mana regen. Like considering you have, let's say, a 4k mana pool, 1k mana per second is very, very strong sustain. And so the idea would be we would click Chaos Inoculation, Mind Over Matter, And what that would mean is we could have a big ES pool where, let's say, we have 10K, 15K ES. These are all realistic numbers. I think even more so than I said before. If you know my previous video, there was a key piece I was missing. They actually introduced a rune called the Iron Rune, which gives local percent ES up to 20%. So what ends up happening is my estimates for 2 to 3K flat from your gear, that estimate instantly goes up to somewhere closer to 2,500 to 4K, even I would say flat you could get from your gear, which means the end game ES numbers, I think there's a good chance we might see 15 to 20K ES on the early access, unless they nerf it really early on before somebody crafts some good gear. But the point is, we'd have this big ES barrier, and then by the time the enemy gets through this big ES barrier, we have another 4K mana that's regenning at 1K per second they have to go through. Most life builds are going to have a hard time getting to 4K life, and that's just our backup defense. The enemy has to get through our 10K ES first to then get to our mana. So it should be very, very strong.
Păi Mind over Matter aștept să văd dacă va fi jucabil. Va fi Mind over Matter. Dar oare îi skill gem Mind over Matter sau e note pe skill tree? Ce dracu este? Ce e aici? Mind over Matter. Mindful. Open mind. Mana regen. Sturdy mind. Mana regen. Tempered mind. Physical damage, critical damage bonus. Mind over Matter. All damage is taken from mana before life. 50% less mana recovery rate.
In terms of just raw EHP and overall tank in terms of max hit, stuff like that. But not only that, I highlighted the 8 and 9 node first because I was really excited about. We also get the access to something that most builds don't have, which is a way to sustain ES outside of recharge, which is elemental damage taken recouped as energy shield. Now, recoup taking 8 seconds is a fairly big nerf, and I was unsure about this. I wasn't sure how I felt about it, but I'm still coming away with the conclusion that over the duration of 8 seconds, you're getting almost half the damage you've taken back. That's a pretty big deal, especially considering like they chip you down, they finally get to your mana pool, and you have this mana pool that's resistant because it keeps regenning. But then all that damage they did to you over however many seconds to get your ES depleted, you have this built-up recoup that is also proccing and resisting the damage that's incoming to try to finish you off. I think it's going to end up being very, very tanky because of this. So right now, just looking at these trees, I think it's pretty no-brainer that Arcane Surge Effect, and the Recoup nodes are just going to feel fantastic with the CI combined with a big Mind over Matter pool. I think it's going to feel really, really good. Outside of that, the other nodes, there's some good things here, but it's hard for me to justify giving up any of these other nodes. I can see a world where maybe I can give up Heart of the Storm sometimes, but Arcane Surge, I think, is it's just too strong to ignore. I believe the scaling with Arcane Surge that they showed with the spell gain is extra is just something that you can't ignore. And thus, because of that, it's really hard to justify not going the thing that allows you, that unlocks the ability to sustain mana at a very efficient rate. Because Arcane Surge isn't easy to proc. The Arcane Surge support requires you to spend 100% of your total.
Showcase, mă.
Aș vrea ca toată lumea să înțeleagă că aceste alegeri nu reprezintă un concurs de frumusețe.
Ladies, gentlemen, and exiles of all ages, with early access for Path of Exile 2 coming out in just a couple of days, one of the biggest questions to answer if you've decided you're going to play the game is what class are you going to choose? And more information was officially released just last night, going over every single notable passive from the Ascendancy trees, so every major way in which each Ascendancy will affect your class's gameplay. Technically speaking, a large portion of the game doesn't really care about your base class choice, because the actual passive skill tree itself is the same for every class, aside from your different starting locations, and even active skills are all tied to either a specific weapon type or stat requirement long term, because technically you could be a Deadeye Ranger and then also equip a crossbow and have your crossbow skills like you were playing a mercenary as well if you really wanted to, but ascendancies are permanent. You can only unlock one per character.
Sorceress Starter Guide. Beginner, weapons, skills and more. Ia să vedem. 2 days ago.
Path of Exile 2 releases just in a few days here, and it is due time for everyone to start choosing their classes. So first up here we'll go over the Sorceress, as that is one of the 6 classes released.
Caractere neechilibrate, ai traume de la Diablo. O să rămâi surprins, ăsta e mult peste Diablo.
Releasing during early access. I'll go over the entire overview, the skills, the ascendancies. We'll deep dive into what that can look like for the specialization system, as well as even good starter weapons, and a whole bunch more. What's up, world? It's Utopia back in with another video. Today we're checking out all things Path of Exile 2. Okay, so let's jump into the Sorceress class. We'll get into the entire overview there, what we're going to be looking like for build stuff and the starting weapons. Of course, as a starter, the Sorceress is a class that's built fundamentally around elemental damage, and it is one of the main spellcasters alongside the Witch. It is also, of course, an int-based class or intelligence. And from what we know so far, it's going to start near the top of the passive skill tree. And if you didn't know already, the skill trees are all linked together, so all 6 classes will use the same 1500 passive skill tree. However, they will be located in different sections of that skill tree. This one in particular is known for starting at the very top. It will have very easy access to things like elemental damage, spell damage, energy shield, and cast speed. Now the main weapon type for Sorcerer...
A2, Monk. Monk is amazing.
Hey guys, Gassy TV here with another Path of Exile 2 video, and in this one we're going to talk about the Monk and its 2 ascendancy choices that we'll have access to in early access coming December 6th. Very excited for this class. Actually has some really cool choices that we're going to deep dive a little bit with the nodes that has been revealed. Now do keep in mind, since we don't have all the information, it is impossible to say how good this class will actually be or its ascendancy choices, and we have no idea what kind of builds we can make until we actually play it. So we're just going to go through what has been revealed. I'll give you guys some of my takes on it and move from there. But before we dive into this video, I want to point out that we are this close to 100,000 subscribers, at which point as a very fast on the class, as well as the playtesting that a lot of us content creators have done in the past year with the class, gives us a pretty good insight for what to expect. Now, the Monk class itself has been portrayed as a very fast-paced, agile martial arts combatant, and is also said to not be a very tanky class to play. Relying on its high mobile playstyle is the way to stay alive, essentially. And that said, the Ascendancy nodes revealed has shown some pretty interesting mechanics that we could play with, and some even referencing to some theoretically super tanky approaches, which kind of counteracts the idea that Jonathan Rogers said in our interview that it was supposed to be a little squishier. Most people had a lot of deaths on that class compared to the others. Well, let's start with the Monk Ascendancy Invoker. In here, we have quite a few options, starting with Faith is a Choice, which grants you the skill Meditate. Now, again, skills granted by Ascendancy choices are going to be skills that we can 6-link in our skills section. What this does is a channeling ability that doubles your energy shield, which is quite interesting, but I'm not sure how well that would work unless you have other type of modifiers or scalars that would play in favor of you having double energy shield. But it seems a bit odd to have an ability that you have to channel to double your energy shield. But we'll see once we play this in December. Second node here on the left side of the skill tree for the ascendancy is I Am the Blizzard. Gain 10% of damage as extra cold damage, and on freezing enemies create chilled ground. Now, it's very interesting node since in PoE 1, most of the modifiers that says gain X% of damage always refers to either X% elemental damage or an elemental specific damage or physical damage gained as extra Y damage. In this node, it's basically saying that we're getting 10% of all your damage, no matter what kind of damage it is added as extra cold damage. There is a similar node on the opposite side of this called I Am the Thunder. Seemingly, you're able to take both of these nodes, by the way. And this one says the same thing, but gets 10% of damage as extra lightning damage instead, and also provides the 25% chance on shocking an enemy to create shocked ground. The fourth node connecting to both I Am the Blizzard and I Am the Thunder is called And I Shall Rage. This grants you the skill Unbound Avatar, which again can be 6-linked. This ability gets you a ramping stacking buff of increasing your efficiency in combat as you're playing the game and are killing enemies. There wasn't not much more said about the Unbound Avatar, so it'll be very interesting to see what kind of mixture we can do with these nodes alone. The last node we were shown in the reveal is a connecting node requiring 4 ascendancy points on the very south part of the ascendancy. We don't know the node before this, but what this node is doing is basically giving you elemental expression, which triggers elemental expression on melee crit. And this is called And Scatter Them to the Winds. Further again, pushing the emphasis on you killing enemies or to get some stacks for the Unbound Avatar, whereas the Scatter Them to the Winds is giving you triggers whenever you do a crit with a melee attack, being more...
Nu știu, Monkey mi se pare să fie cam squishy. The one-handed weapons, two-handed weapons, stun build up. Increase area of effect if you stunned an enemy with two-handed melee weapon recently. Armor, block chance. Maximum rage. 40% decreased aftershock area of effect. 5% increase area of effect for attacks. 8% increase attack area damage. Aftershock AoE. Stun threshold. Stun build up. Endurance charge when you heavy stun a rare or unique enemy. Physical damage prevented recouped as life. Era undeva increase maximum life stun threshold ăsta. Your hits can't be evaded, never deal critical hits. Warcry speed. Warcry area of effect. 5% reduce attack speed, stun build up, attack damage 50%. Yo. Crushing verdict. 5% reduce attack speed, 30% increase magnitude of ailments, increase duration of damaging ailments. Nu știu dacă joci poate Blade Build, eventual. %10 reduce maximum mana, 1% increase damage per 50 strength. Asta dacă ar fi strength stacker. 50% chance to gain onslaught on killing blow with axes. Rage. You can wield two-handed axes, maces or swords in one hand. Triple attribute requirements of weapon. Wow. Dar poți să folosești două two-handed. OP. Și ăsta, 1% increase damage per 50 strength. 15. Per 15 strength. So at 150 strength it's 10% increase damage. At 300 strength is 20% increase damage. Stun build up increase area of effect if you have stunned an enemy recently. Ce caracter faci? Nu știu, mă gândesc să fac un Titan Slammer, dar poate că nu o să-mi placă, mă gândesc că poate fi încet, slowish. Jumătatea aia de joc e de 10 ori mai mult content decât Diablo 4 pe care tu l-ai cumpărat în prima zi. Da. Pentru jucătorii de PoE. Rage. Ce e asta? Physical Thorns. Increase skill speed. Skill mana cost converted to life cost. Blood Rush. Reduce mana cost. Skill effect duration. Totem placement speed. Life regen. Crit chance. Increase attack and cast speed. 25% increase physical damage. You. Break 50% of armor on heavy stunning an enemy. Totem. Break 60% increase armor. 10% chance to defend with 200 of your armor. Physical damage prevented recoup as life. Să vedem Mace. Astea sunt singurele puncte de Mace. Ok, two-handed. Increase damage with two-handed weapons. Stun build up, increase damage with two-handed weapons. Deci, aici, area of effect for attacks. Increase accuracy rating 15 plus 10 dexterity. Weapon swap speed, knockback distance, life leech instant, life regen. Skill effect duration. Rezolut tehnic. Nu știu, mă tentează să joc asta. Maximum fire resist. Plus 2 maximum endurance charges. Enemies in jagged ground you create take 10% increased damage. Nu știu dacă merită. Your stun threshold is doubled that you cannot dodge roll.